Hi everybody. We are going
Hi.
to, we can begin our second day of conversation. Now you can all unmute your microphones. So welcome to the second day of discussions on is your signal weak or strong, and we can find that out based on our internet connections as well today. I think a couple of more people will be joining us in a little while. I'm going to pick up from where we left off yesterday. I have put in a few questions. I think Kritika mentioned something about every act of communication creating a language. And so I thought we can begin with that, whether every act of living can potentially generate different kinds of languages. So would anybody like to begin?
If every act of living can potentially,
Create a language.
so how open do we want this construct of language to be? I mean, isn't language a word that is, useful in a particular situation? That is that we understand that words are symbols are going to be used in a way that they can be understood to mean a uniform set of meaning,
Yeah, but
right?
you can, what becomes a symbol can be open because that's how languages are born.
I think it does not, yeah, exactly. It can be open because we are only talking about communicating, and communicating can be done in any format. And when a channel has been opened and there's a person who wants to come, or a being that wants to communicate, and a certain set of symbols are used, whatever they are, for that purpose.
I'm interested in the idea of even silence being a language. Sometimes devoid symbols, devoid vocabulary, what happens then?
Yeah,
Can
no, we spoke about that for.
Yeah.
I think we hinted about that yesterday,
Yeah,
maybe
and we can, I would
briefly.
like to continue with that also
Yeah,
today, which is
yeah.
why one of the other questions I am looking at is if language is something that harbors familiarity, what does the unarticulated hold? In terms of how we look at, and that I'm looking at language as being something that is spoken or heard or written, something that is spelt out in any form. And when it is not spelt out is what I'm looking as, what I'm terming to be unarticulated.
articulated?
So that could also be addressed.
No, but I'm not entirely satisfied where but in terms of closing the symbol being open and it's still working as uh, still working as a language, because I mean, I understand that what a symbol is can be open, and that's how languages are formed and how they grow, like you said.
Yeah,
But the role that a symbol plays, so eventually, no matter which symbol you bring in
right,
to
right.
play,
Yeah,
eventually a symbol is going to be a pattern that's going to be understood in a similar kind of way, and
yes.
that's how you build up on the language.
Okay.
So how is it that that you imagine that our life itself would be a language, or how is it that you imagine that silence would be a language? Because how would standard interpretations of symbols stick? How would they stick in?
Prayas, I'm not able to go with the idea that language has to be fixed. Like that every symbol has to have a repetition and then it becomes a symbol. I'm not able to, like the thing is, if there is something that wants to express or wants to communicate, it does it in some form, and it may be doing it in a new form every time, or it might use a new symbol which has not yet become a language in terms of the standard definition of a language. So if you're living, there are things that you're doing and they have not yet been interpreted as a, as a language in the standard
Yeah,
form.
I mean, I can understand that your intent that you want to communicate,
No,
that
not
could be.
intent. Intent is already, we are not talking about intent because we are doing what comes after intent.
Yeah, so I mean, I can only imagine that your intent can vary, but I can't imagine how symbols, which are already symbols,
If you
how
have a
they.
new concept that you want to articulate and you don't already have a symbol for it, then a new symbol comes.
But then the repetitive use of the signal would eventually become the language of what you're trying to explain through the symbol itself.
Right,
Yes.
and the first time you use it, it has not yet been repeated, but it could possibly be repeated. So the first time.
So I think for the sake of structuring this conversation, it may benefit to go with this idea of giving language some sort of boundary and not say, if you keep it completely open, then anything can become a language. That we do understand it has that potential. But I'm wondering if we can go in the direction of what Prayas said in terms of patterns, and even if it is, and I was thinking about what Sonia said, even if something is silent, I think silence can also form a pattern because the silence is not endless.
Silence could, I'm wondering if silence can be a symbol. And
It can.
And that could be repeated in a pattern within a structure where there are other patterns.
Yes.
That could be symbols, other kinds of symbols, but then silence would also be symbolic.
And I think
No,
with
but silence itself would have a symbolic value. But how silence would otherwise be a symbol would be durations of silence. But how would
and
silence
also
be
the
a symbol?
situation in which the silence exists.
Yeah, it's contextual.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And the context is not contained within, right? So so in the sense, silence wouldn't contain the context that it operates in within itself.
Is silence the absence of symbol? Because if it is, I mean, I can see how silence can be a symbol, and that's where Prayas talks about having durations, or it is punctuated with other, sounds or symbols. But what if we define silence as no symbol at all?
I'm also interested in this idea of context. So you understand silence within a context, but and lots of times when there are symbols, you need to look at them within the context. Is there some way in which language can exist without context? I don't know if this is getting too vague, but
I wish I wish Marcus was here today, because in computer science there is a whole branch of languages called called context-free languages, and these are exactly what you're talking about. But what those languages are about, as far as I understand, is how context is learned within each scope of its use, right? So there is no universal legacy context, but there is context that's learned within the scope of the use.
Okay.
Sorry, say that again. Within the scope of.
So let's say if we make it a rule that every time we are going to talk, we'll behave like strangers.
Okay.
So that's like a context-free language. So so there is nothing from a prior conversation that can creep into this.
So this is a language being developed. It is not existing, but it develops itself.
Yeah.
But the rule gives it a context, doesn't it? You're already giving it a framework that it's not going to use a
the
reference.
rules help you estimate or maybe guess what kind of what kind of expression will come out of the whole thing, but you can't in context-free languages you're not able to frame languages in a very pakka form. Like you can't do it in a very fixed form. You can only interpret, hint and poke. Like you can't really cast it.
And so it's like everything you say, it's the first time, and then if it repeats again, then it adds to the lexicon also.
Yeah, and there is no, the lexicon doesn't grow. So in the sense, only as far as the scope of the program.
Right.
The
lexicon has to grow though.
Not universally. Only
not
in the
universally,
scope.
But in the context of that language. And that's how the context itself is being defined.
In the context of that program, not the language.
So what if you use something that is related to a context? And the reason I'm bringing this up is one of the posts I put up today when I shared the link to come live for this broadcast is something by David Ives. It's 1 to 8. The number is 1 to 8, but instead of saying 1, 2, 3, 4, he says when you free fall, which sounds like 1, 2, 3, 4.
That should be the phonetical understanding.
Exactly.
Of
there's
the
a word.
language.
Yeah. So there's a word play, and I'm just imagining if the context can be something that is related, but you're not like a surrogate context. It isn't the real context, but you're using something.
But I think again over there you have to know the language to be able to understand that reference. I mean, if you're not that familiar with the language, you may not be able to pick it up because you're only used to listening to those words in a very particular manner that you're still learning.
So but all languages are learned when you don't know it at all. You just start understanding over time because you understanding with other contexts also.
But I think as you get more familiar with it, you start getting more familiar with the nuances of the language, and that's when you are okay with allowing other experiments to come within the realm of your understanding of that language.
So yes, I get what you're saying. I'm just imagining if that if you don't take that experiment for what it is, and if you imagine hypothetically that the reference of the 1, 2, 3, 4 language was like a ghost. You don't know it exists. And you start learning this weird alien language, and that's what you will start learning. And then it still provides a context, and you don't know that a context, it has its own context also.
There's also the context of you yourself knowing a different language, and you're desperately trying to make associations of those sounds that you're hearing. So you don't know that language, but you know some other language, and you have your own.
That's also possible.
Yeah.
And also, I think making sense of something is depends more on our desperate need to make sense than on what we are trying to make sense of, right?
So that is true. That is true. And therefore there could be some errors in that place where you're probably going to miss something which, if you weren't that desperate, maybe there was no meaning and you attributed it some meaning.
So does understanding or making sense have to do with recognizing the symbol and then the pattern, probably in a context? So I'm just wondering, if you don't understand or you cannot identify the symbol and you do not identify the pattern, then can you not know what is being communicated?
Like,
I agree with that.
I've always thought that misunderstanding the symbols had more scope as far as the poet is concerned, right? So I mean, if I'm writing something, there might be a set number of ways it can be understood, but there'll be a vast number of ways in which can be misunderstood, and that's where the play lies, actually.
Definitely, and that's how the poem becomes personal to the reader, whoever.
Right.
Yeah, and misunderstanding somehow doesn't really come in the framework of communication. I think while it should.
I mean, if you're looking for a certain type of communication, misunderstanding may or may not help. But see, in a poetic communication, that's different. I mean, there's a sort of there's an imagistic sort of journey that the reader is expected to be going through by the writer.
So also you
Huh.
give the poet and the poem some sort of license. So
Yeah.
similarly, I guess it requires some kind of understanding to know how much of a license you can give a form. That
Yeah,
I mean,
I mean,
if you cannot
but
understand the articulation, a
Yeah,
license.
like
but the fact is that something is getting communicated, and that means that poetry is a good tool for communicating some kind of things. Let's say,
right,
but
exactly.
so. I mean, but that is not factored in. It's not given to you as a tool set in your communication strategies, like one of your communication tools. That okay, one of the things you can do is try to be misunderstood. That's not.
But the unfortunate thing is the way things are structured. Like if you have legalese, for example, you have no scope for having any misunderstandings there, and yet there is so much gray area. So
Right.
So there is misunderstanding is also something that can occur from things that have not been said.
yeah,
So silence can
Yeah.
also be a misunderstanding because
yes,
it doesn't say anything and you can misunderstand it to be anything.
yeah,
Yeah, but
and it's
what
like
is misunderstood is still you're still blamed for it.
What do you mean?
I mean, you will still be blamed for what was
Misunderstanding.
misunderstood
Oh,
from
okay.
you. I
because you
mean,
did not articulate it.
Because the person you were having the communication with, I don't know if it works that way. If,
But there is, I mean, understanding is not absolute, no? Nobody ever comprehends any communication completely. There's always going to be something that is
Yes,
not, and I would say the same for what is uttered, for what is
I agree.
articulated.
I agree. Because you could say something which is construed. I mean,
Yeah,
silence is equivalent to saying something also.
yeah.
It's
And
on the
especially
listener.
with things like art and poetry, half of the communication lies in these blurred areas where things are not really fully uttered.
Yeah,
And
like the
that's
poetry.
where different people, I mean, that's where the whole um, diversity of interpretation starts.
And I think that's where you could, in some way, refer to an understanding of an unspoken language.
Right, right. Which is what brings me to another question for today. Uh, Although I haven't actually put it up, I was wondering if we, how we put ourselves into the languages we uh, utter or articulate, whether we are embedding our personas into it in some way.
in context to this, I'm thinking of the artist statement.
Uh-huh.
How much do you say? How much do you spell out? Do you
Right.
actually need to say when you already have one form? You need something in support. So you're saying something in one form, and then you have another form to support what you're saying.
Right.
So how much do you say, and how do you say it? Which is again
That's
another,
true.
yeah, playing with two different forms. So it's always been a complexity. So it would be interesting to know what Birangana, Prayas, or any of the others, even Satya. Especially if you go to a gallery and you see an artist's work and then you see this artist statement.
I
What
think
do you
when
think?
there's too much said, you feel like, and that's, it also depends, I think, from artist to artist or from the person who's reading it, that too much said in some way leaves very little for interpretation. You want that room where you can also explore things and allow yourself to reflect on something, but at the same time have just enough to maybe channelize your thoughts through that statement towards where the artist wants you to think. I mean, that's what I feel an artist statement should do.
I mean, I think in this year, in this time, if anyone is seriously trying to self-contextualize, like which is what an artist statement tries to do, if anyone is still trying to do that, then it should also account for the environment of cynicism within which that is going to happen.
Right.
That's exactly right, because I was just thinking, I can project whatever I want very explicitly in a statement, but actually my intention is altogether different. It might be to mislead the reader. So
Yeah,
there's
because
cynicism, but yeah.
in a time when the keywords that
Yeah.
hold value are so well known, you know,
Yeah.
how difficult would it be to back up a sprinkling of words with sincerity, just to
Absolutely.
make it believable. So
Yeah.
I think, I mean, I don't mind being manipulated, but just, I mean, when you manipulate me, just think through that there is already some layer of cynicism which is going to be automatically assigned to whatever you say, and outthink that. I mean, just penetrate that layer of cynicism, and I'm happy to be manipulated.
But the creation of an artist statement is also, in another way, like Sonia says, it's a completely different form. It may have nothing to do with your artwork sometimes, because you are also approaching the artist statement in terms of what it has to be and what it has to do, its function.
So there's a self-consciousness in creating the...
Yeah, and you're never approaching your artwork in that kind of functional way. It's
I think many people do. The intent is to sell it.
no, I'm not saying that kind of a function, but what you create, the content of the artwork.
Even the content, right? Like it might be tailored according to what is being, what is sellable or whatever.
Well, if that intention is clear and the person's doing it, then that's fine. But is the artist statement reflecting what the artwork is doing?
But I mean, would an artist really want to do that? Would anyone really want to reveal what something is truly doing? Because then, what is left? You know, if you
You
reveal
can't.
that.
I'm
These
saying
are
you can't
different
do it.
degrees of art, right? These are different degrees of art, like where there might be a whole bunch of people who prefer to be very explicit and who want to see explicitly spelled out stuff. You know, this round blob means this, therefore its value is this, therefore you need to pay me this much.
I mean, I can only think of that as a joke.
Sorry?
I can only think of someone doing that as a joke.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's because you all are in a different space here. I mean, if you look at a Gajendra Chauhan or something, I mean, in their space it's different.
Right.
Anyway, it's a digression perhaps.
Well, I was just wondering if we can move to another question that I had for today, which is to do with physical presence and how, in terms of how performance or what we perform, and this I'm relating to what we began with, whether every act of living can potentially be a language. Then if we talk of making art or writing this artist statement, it's a performance. We're performing something for an end goal. So we're creating a language for it. through our personas. So
Yeah, but what you are saying is that a commonly accepted uh, framework? Because I mean, what I'm troubled most about with, for example, artist statements or with living as language or whatever is how it a sincerity is attempted. So it's more troubling to see someone trying to be sincere about an artist statement than someone trying to be flippant about it.
it's more troubling. Why, I don't understand. Why do you say it's more
I mean, it
troubling?
is troubling. I mean, it's like if someone is really trying to be sincere about an artist statement, I don't know. It makes me sad.
Why?
I mean, so how can he do it?
So are you saying that an artist statement has to be approached in a more
As a performance, like you said, right? So if it is being approached as a performance, so it's being approached as a conscious construction and not as a sincere construction.
I don't know how you see this idea of sincerity. I think performance is also sincere. I mean,
No,
every
performance is sincere only in the sense that you want to work with with the effect of, let's say, whatever you perform and then whatever is received, but you don't want to you're not trying to work with the, I mean, what I mean by sincerity is that you actually believe that there is something absolutely real. So
Open-endedness in some way, probably.
I feel like you're talking about self-awareness.
yeah.
What you're doing, you are able to, at a meta level, say that in a constructed artist statement. Whereas those who don't do it, there's a certain level of naivete that goes with it, and that sort of, in a way, that's sincere, but at the same time, it's not what might appeal to a certain kind of viewer.
yeah, I mean, it's like if we all know that we are actors here, then I would like you to address yourself as an actor and like, you know, and construct your part rather than getting into the business of, you know, this is my story and this is where I come from and this is
But I
what I
think
stand for.
a lot of the nowadays, at least, I feel like the structures are such that where you have to, like you yourself said earlier, use certain language in artist statements also to be projected as an artist, in quotes. There's a lot of mixture. Like there's sophistication is at various levels, and I feel like there's a lot of noise where a whole bunch of actors are in the sphere where people are trying to be an artist or acting like an artist, but not acting in the way that you meant, Prayas, earlier.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying that, yeah, if we all, if I think in the environment we exist in, if there is a more pragmatic association with conscious construction, then it will just be better for all of us. That just accept it, that you are trying to project an image, and let's just get on with it.
I think that's what's important. I mean, when you look at what we're right now calling an artist statement or an artist language, it's the open-endedness where the artist is okay with somebody else stepping into what their thoughts are and still being able to deal with it, which is where I think the genuineness of it would also come in, as opposed to something that they're trying to be.
Right.
Right. So something they're offering as a perspective and not as a model of the self.
Yeah.
If we have to, I'm trying to compare. I'm not disregarding. Okay. No, I have to think this before I say something.
No, you can use it. Use us as your whiteboards. It's okay.
Yeah, you can wipe
Okay.
what you say.
I guess when you paint or you sculpt or you write, you leave some kind of a mark, and in that sense, performance is a little more ephemeral. So I mean, I wonder how much, of course, and you're also acting. Sometimes you get into a role, but how much can the body lie because you don't lie? How much can the body tell a lie because you don't leave anything behind and as a mark? But
But when you
it's something
play,
within a particular time, and in terms of the gestures that you make, do you really construct? Of course, you can construct the language, you can construct an act, and you can construct what you're trying to say. But then sometimes there are spaces in between where there is no conscious construction, when you don't make a particular mark. I'm okay. I think I should.
Yeah, but why is
very sketchy.
acting? Why is acting? Why does acting have to be a lie? Why does performance have to be thought of as, like, if you're playing a role, you're playing that role sincerely? And I would again get back to Prayas about this thing of sincerity. Whatever role you choose to play, your intention to play that role is still sincere. So if you're playing the role of writing an artist statement, you're going to do that with sincerity.
No, I mean, sincerity is not commitment, right? Sincerity is not equal to commitment. What I mean by sincerity is that you are actually thinking that what you are going to do is going to happen. When you very well know that what's going to happen will have most probably no relation to what you will do.
But you know, Prayas, I feel
sure about that.
I feel like this discussion is from the perspective of the viewer. I mean, as a viewer of the art, you expect this of the artist, and this is very personal.
The viewer expects sincerity from an artist?
No, so we were talking of, Rahul, we were talking of whether language can extend itself to become, to every act becoming a certain, can generate a language, every act of living. And in that sense, whether we are all in a role of performance. And I think Sonia brought up something about how the language, there are two parallel languages used when you make an artwork and when you write an artist statement. Because the artwork has a lot that is unsaid, and the artist statement is trying to say what the artwork is about. So you have to be careful about what you're articulating.
Yeah, very much.
And so Prayas made this statement that he would feel very sad if somebody wrote an artist statement with sincerity. So that's the background of this discussion right now. And I was saying that even if you choose to perform, even if writing an artist statement is a role, that choice is sincere.
No, I mean it's just acknowledging how complex a system you envision yourself to be existing in. Because if you really accept that you are in this complex system where close to everything is an accident, then you won't identify with any output as being created by you. You know, you set off, you triggered something in motion. Now that might have been entirely of surplus value, so kuch farak hi nahi pada. And then how can you be sincere about it? You can only be I don't know.
But again, this is again higher awareness. I mean, I can't see how many people are actually aware that things are really quite random. You know, most people think they are in control and they are making things happen.
So that's something wrong with the schooling.
It's a question of free will, right? Like.
Yeah.
Perhaps is it sincerity opposed to like playfulness and that kind of thing, or role play, or?
No, it's. I mean, essentially what I'm saying is very simple. It's like if you're constructing, then you need to essentially accept that you are a construct as well.
Yeah.
If you're constructing and saying that I am authentic, then it doesn't work.
Yeah, for me, authentic doesn't work, but
I mean, you'll have to be a part of the same model that you're creating for what you're doing, right? So if you're constructing and you're saying that we're all part of this construct and all that, then you are a construct as well. Then I mean, it doesn't lessen the value of what you might be doing in any way. I mean, for me to think of someone as a sincere practitioner who is brilliant, and someone who is just a good construction agent, doesn't take away anything.
I think this is a perfect example of not really understanding this word sincere, because I think each of us is understanding
Yeah.
how you're articulating sincerity very, very differently. I don't know if Atsuma-san was trying to say something in between. I don't know.
Hey, maybe can you hear us? Hi.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi.
No, that was Rahul. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
This thing of something else came up when you spoke of being sincere, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that the role you're playing. This idea of being authentic is not. I mean, what I'm kind of getting lost in how you're relating it to this thing of being sincere and how.
No, I mean, I'm just saying that if you're constructing something for me, let's say an experience,
Right.
then I can very well say that, just as your experience is a construction and it is very believable for me, in the same way, you must be a construction, and because you are very believable for me, so you must be a construction as well. So how does that take away anything from
Prayas, what has that got to do with the artist statement?
because the artist statement needs to, I think, needs to feel comfortable with the fact that it is a conscious construction and not an earnest, sincere communication of what their artistic objectives might be or might not be,
Yeah.
Prayas, are you dismissing
I agree to
altogether?
that.
Sorry, Prayas, are you dismissing altogether any kind of expression that has not stemmed from a pre-thought-out, constructed manner?
At a very basic level, yes. So I mean, you might have an urge to communicate or express something, but but that urge gets processed through many languages, and maybe and through many of the things that we have spoken about collectively here, through context, through all of these things, and at the end of which it doesn't remain without the artifact of construction. The artifact of construction creeps in.
But isn't our behavior also an artifact of construction? Each of us behave in certain way. We all have our own patterns of doing things.
Is referring to some kind of a self-reflexivity, constant self-reflexivity. So, like constantly no mirrored.
I think that we could probably go back to what you mentioned earlier. Once you've let something out beyond your control, I mean, the moment it's out there in the public or you've shared it with somebody, you're immediately opening it up to other people in some way, reflecting to that. And then I think it's about how they reflect. I mean, whether they, about sincerity, bringing that in, of the way they refer to the way you've actually tried to communicate that thought or the statement, and depending on whether that's the way you wanted them to refer to it or the way you thought you'd be able to control that is, I think, in some way achievement and failure of your sincerity, if you can take it to that.
But then I'll have to go back to what Sonia said. You're using two different languages to say something, and I don't think either of them is going to really fulfill what you really want to say.
Also, when you use two different languages, sometimes you have different tendencies. Even though your subjectivity, you're the creator, and your subjectivity is a combination of something, but you have tendencies according to the medium. So you have two different tendencies. And when one form is in support of the other, in the case of an artist statement, I would like to throw this word in its tendencies.
No, so
The way you
Prayas,
would-
how would you bring in sincerity with these two forms then?
Actually, I like Prayas's bringing in of sincerity because, see, like from what I observe of so many artist statements, though the artwork itself is supposed to be this interpretable, open, ambiguous suggestion to the world that the artist is making, but somehow the artist statement written by the same artist is a very sincere explanation and defense of the work. That is in most of the artist statements I read, you know, and maybe yes, one point is the medium, the change in medium, but and also maybe the other point is a change in context. We are writing for different audiences, or maybe the same audience but for a different purpose. But
Yeah, it's a different purpose that I want to I would like to have more transparency about, you know.
yes,
So
yes,
it's okay if you want to make your power play. It's fine. I mean, but you know, just be honest about it that you're doing that so that I can ignore you.
You're asking too much, Prayas, I think.
Of course I am. I mean,
But why are you assuming? Okay, well, why are you assuming that somebody is one? How can anybody generate any sorts of power play with an artist statement?
I mean, of course. I mean, is an artist statement anything about anything else than trying to fabricate value around?
Yeah, it's a positioning
Around-
of one's product.
Yeah, and positioning is
the authorial power of interpretation.
yeah.
And
So,
Well, I don't know. I've never seen an artist statement as something that.
that helps.
No, I've always looked at it as something that gives, that tries to give some more insight into what could be going on.
I mean, it's also trying
I
to
always
impose
look at
an
an
image
artist
on
statement
on the viewer, right? There's an
closes the
image.
possibility of interpretation rather than opens it up.
Sorry?
Yeah,
I
that's
always look at
true.
most of the artist statement that it's something that closes the possibilities of interpretation and engagement rather than something that opens it up.
But ideally, it should be the other way around.
Right.
Ideally, yeah, but I think the work of artists.
Ideally, people should not have the means to reverse fabricate, reverse engineer value. Ideally, a value should be something that emerges and then aligns itself. But we are living in a time where you can reverse engineer everything.
I mean, these days value is arising out of the free market, so really it is happening and it's a natural format, right? Like whatever the free market is.
No, but you can you're also able to reverse engineer it, like you know. So so value as a notion is not strictly something that emerges anymore. You can very well fabricate it if you know what you're doing, and just for me, artist statement is exactly an attempt at that, which most often than not fails. You know, it ends up taking away any value that might have been there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a cynical viewpoint, and I agree with you on that. I mean, I think everything is
You agree to being a cynic.
absolutely, because I unfortunately am unable to see anything sincerely at all. That's where I've reached now, where I see anything and I'm like, definitely there's something else behind this.
Okay, I think it's time to wind up today. And those of you who want to rejoin Satya's group in 15 minutes, we'll post the link. Satya, maybe you can post the link on Facebook. You have?
Okay, all right, yeah.
Yeah, so I hope to see you all tomorrow. Thank you for coming.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, bye.